Dobro jutro, pozdravljeni in dobrodošli na drugem dnevu tega našega mednarodnega simpozija Preminil v sodobni dramatiki po letu 2000. Začenjamo z peto sekcijo, ki jo bo otvoril Benjamin Zajc s svojo predstavitvijo The Substance of Regional Millennial Playwriting. Samo še eno praktično obvestilo. Kot veste, smo omejeni na teh 15 minut, nekaj seveda tudi pustimo podaljška, tako da vas bom 3 minute pred koncem malo pomahal, tako da potem počasi zmanevrirate proti zaključku. Samo en moment, kje imam jaz to? So Benjamin Zajc studied at the Academy of Theatre, Radio, Film and Television in Ljubljana. He is the author of many projects and he received several prizes for his dramas. Benjamin, please, the floor is yours.
Jaz sem si za svoj delovni jezik izbral angleščino, tako da bo tole zdaj v angleščini. So, good morning, everybody. So, as Gaspar said, my topic was the substance of original millennial playwriting, which I believe will serve as a lovely introduction to the following presentation by Varya, Masha, and Jakob. I read during the quarantine quite a few plays by young authors coming from ex-Yugoslavia territory, and today I will present to you a few conclusions I came to and found interesting, but in order to respect the timeline, I will support them only by 2 examples that I think we might all know. That is Use Me and Discard by Iza Stoica and The Last After Party by Dino Pešut. So, the millennial drama, less burdened by the events of the previous century and more marked by the economic crisis of the early 2000s, we can observe even less optimism, fewer utopian images, and more nihilism and cynicism. Their dramatic material is more self-centered and creates a world that corresponds to its own present, of course, obviously. It's primary about the individual's attitude to survival in this oppressive, corrupt, dysfunctional system. The individual's search for meaning, and of course their alienation and inability to communicate with the society that we are thrown into. Here we are talking about the characters who have lived through the experience of neoliberalism, which promotes pessimism, of course, and the belief that the market rules the world, while the politics are incapable of creating change. These characters are different from the older, let's say, counterparts, so-called baby boomers, who experienced rapid social change in the 60s and 70s and are marked by major improvements in healthcare, education, social and political rights, and so on. This has encouraged the previous generation's view that the ordinary mortals can change the world for the better, can solve the political, social problems, etc. Their formative years created a belief in relentless optimism, let's say, and that's something that could not be formed while growing up in this century. Therefore, authors write their characters through a pessimistic attitude which leads to, let's say, painting a picture of the current world from the perspective of a certain generation in which the neoliberal mentality has taken hold. Through this, a kind of social drama emerges and is created that captures the atmosphere of its time and has its sense of, in a sense, has some kind of a zeitgeist, and thus also becomes morbidly relevant to its target audience and only target audience. All of these plays that I read take as the central theme the specific issue that the generation in question is facing, These are the themes that are maybe alien to older generation or that they have not paid much attention to because, of course, other pressing issues have been at the forefront of their minds. These plays attach all the key problems of this generation, as I noticed, and to generalize a bit, to a particular situation or a short-lived plot, for example, pregnancy or car accident in Iza Stoica's play. And usually those short-lived plots or conflicts are something that older generation might or often do or does label as childish grumbling or contradiction to the social system, and that's chosen on purpose. The characters the seemingly detached conversations, dialogue and stuff like that elaborate on all the pressing issues from inequality, gender discrimination, nepotism, to, of course, housing, unemployment, escapism, and drugs, which, of course, existed before already, but are now different and are more dooming, I would say. And that can be felt through the plays. And these themes manifest themselves through a kind of emotional storm through which the society surrounding the characters is then painted, drawn, presented. Because these characters were born, usually, at the end of socialism, raised under capitalism, marked by war, their origin, and they live and act not with the thought of previous generations and some previous destiny or something like that. And of course, they do not act with the hope that they will change the world or that they will change their situation, but with the real hunger to go beyond the default, chasing dreams that they already doubt from the very beginning. These heroes, we could say, live, love, work. In an age of universal accessibility, in which not only personality is lost, but literally all life support, because they are a generation of young people who have to learn to live in a completely different world, in which all the tradition disappeared, the bad and the good. It's also, of course, worth mentioning that these texts are covered with the idea of neoliberalism, in which the human being is presented as a product, a labor force. The critique of this system is then manifested to the character's willingness to be the product. For example, the character of Alma in Pešut's play is ready to sell her body to have money for rent, to survive, etc. All the characters in Stoica's play and many other plays by her repeatedly break their bonds of friendship precisely because of the battle for the promised goods. In neoliberalism, for example, jobs, stability, housing, etc. Nevertheless, what is interesting to me is that these authors still write with some kind of optimism. Those characters are filled with a specific optimism about the future, which is, of course, visible in small patterns of hope, of disillusion, we could also say, now that we see where the world is going. But everything is very far away. So we still don't know where we are, and the characters don't know where they are either. But the texts are aware of that this optimism is inseparable from the system to which they belong, and therefore is doomed to fail. And at first glance, where does this take us structurally? At first glance, these texts mostly look like a classical dramatic structure, but on closer inspection, we can observe a number of deviations which seem to become and remain one of the key elements of course, contemporary drama and contemporary millennial drama. One of the key features in that is that the characters in the plays are not tied to their fate, of course, or rather their plot and their destiny is not tied to a fatal flaw or a misunderstanding or a mistake of which the character is aware at the end of the play, tries to fix. The characters do not have a development, we could say, the classical development. They are aware of their condition, mistakes, injustices from the very beginning. And they are aware of them and they prove them at the end of the plays. They are also aware of the world they live in, and we could say that the plays in fact live in or exist in a dialogization of the state of the world, of the society in which they find themselves. Nina Leskošek writes a perfect quote for this in the playbill for the first performance of Iza's text, Use Me and Doom. from Mesto Gledališče Ljubljansko, and she says, if any fatal flaw, hamartia, still exists in the modern society, it's a bare fact and a Socratic regret of the moment we were born in, not a particular personal misfortune. To be precise, the fall happened a long time ago. And I think that's very important, because the lack of freedom to change one's own world, however, in a way deprives the dramatic characters of their activity, of the possibility to act. One could even say that it deprives them of their drama. In this, like a psychic tension is formed between the bearers of the dramatic action and the social context, which in turn then gives the rise to actually a rather classical dramatic conflict, which in a certain degree of pessimistic irresolvability resembles the conflict of an ancient Greek tragedy. And this is manifested above all in the subject's inability to overcome or escape the social system they are in, and in which they were actually born already. And in order to potentiate this inability of the subject to triumph in the conflict with society, the authors, all in their own way, get a bit Brechtian to create the alienation between the characters on one hand and the receivers on the other, while directing the focus of their conversation to the main theme, which is this generation that is lost and supposedly has no hope in the future. Moreover, through songs, through some meta moments, or even including narrators and stuff like that, the writers are aware of the fact that all these serious problems are actually problems of the first world, or the world of the privileged, who have everything they need in principle to exist, but still lack something. So what we are trying to find here in this mechanism is this something, what is lacking, and what is this lack. These characters, for the majority of the time of place, just exist, and the inclusion of these poetic elements, for example, and meta moments just reinforces this, the existing, and nothing more. This is a sentiment that is, I think, strongly present in the millennial generation, which is why many autobiographical and self-reflective elements can be found in the texts, even more than before, allowing the receivers of the same generation to identify themselves with the stories in a similar way that the post-war generation, for example, allowed its target audience to do so. That means that in this place, this playwriting, let's say, style, it's possible to observe an increasing shift from writing for people of all times, to create a classic, to writing for specific contemporary audience. This aversion, actually, to universality, bordering on imposter syndrome, actually, is precisely what creates their own generation of receivers. Thank you. The protagonists of millennial drama are moving away from marketing slogans, tired hierarchies, masculine canons, and influences all over the world. And although the self-definition is the millennial punchline, they themselves are dubious about something as serious as defying a literary era. They are not interested in that. And this brings us to a term that I think would be useful for this and will be the finishing part of my presentation. So in 1880, the German philosopher von Hartmann coined the word miserabilism to describe the idea of dangerous pessimism that his generation was facing. It is primarily the feeling of the impossibility of improving the terrible human condition and humanity in general. Although the term could be quickly used to describe this contemporary playwriting, younger playwriting, and literature in general, the journalist Stephen Clark, in an unrelated article, Millennials in the Age of Neo-Misery, points out that the term is no longer relevant to the multitude of dilemmas of the millennial generation, and therefore proposes the concept of neo-misery or neo-miserabilism, which encompasses the new inexplicable physical feeling that things are not quite right, but at the same time carries a hint of optimism that the world will be in harmony again at some point, somewhere in the future, when we are no longer alive, maybe. And I believe this, hopefully, and I believe this term could also be applied to the new playwriting, that we could take this term and use it here, because the analyzed authors also build their plays on this feeling, on consciously or subconsciously. We are in this, and they are bringing their main and side characters to life, to their doubts in the present, and the hopeless situation in which they find themselves without actually being active in it. And that is something that I would conclude with this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. We will continue with another very interesting presentation done by a collective of authors, Varja Hrvatin, Maša Radi Buh, and Jakub Ribic. We have talked and we have heard a lot about Varja Hrvatin's work yesterday, and I'm happy that today we can see several presentations by younger generations that believe in the dramatic writing, that believe that the theater is pertinent, is something worth dealing with, though, as we've heard, quite in a pessimistic world. The Varja, Maša, and Jakub are a collective that was formed at the student radio station, Radio Student, where they co-created a show, Territory of the Theater. And this is obviously one of the offsprings of these actions. Please. The title is, have I told you? No. The title is Generationless Drama. Please.
Dobro jutro še z naše strani. Hvala za lep uvod in za organizacijo simpozija. Hvala tudi vsem, ki ste prišli na enega od teh panelov. Aha. Lahko? Ok. Skratka, dobro jutro še enkrat. Mi smo se podobno kot Benjamin ukvarjali z dramskim pisanjem mlade generacije, pri čemer smo izhajali najprej z nekaj splošnega opažanja, da med mladimi obstaja kar precej zanimanja za dramsko pisanje, kar pomeni, da je produkcija besedil med mladimi, dramskih besedil med mladimi kar precejšna. Nekako vzporedno s tem pa opažamo, da se povečuje tudi zanimanje za njihovo pisanje v smislu pač različne teoretske prakse, ki jo poskuša reflektirati in analizirati, naj si bo v obliki znanstvenih in strokovnih prispevkov, tematskih številk, strokovne periodike, radijskih oddaj, simpozijev in tako naprej. In očitno smo mi eni izmed pač teh derivatov teoretske prakse, ki se tukaj sporoža. Ko smo se začeli ukvarjati s tem vprašanjem, smo si pravzaprav za izhodišče postavili neko zelo osnovno vprašanje. In sicer, kaj je sploh ta mlada generacija? Kako jo lahko definiramo. Da sploh lahko napravimo kakršnekoli zaključke o tej mladi generaciji, mladih piscev in pisk, si moramo najprej odgovoriti na vprašanje, o kom sploh govorimo, ko govorimo o mladi generaciji. Kaj so tisti kriteriji ali pa merila, po katerih pač neko skupino ljudi definiramo v določeno generacijo. Izkaže se namreč, da je teh kriterijev več in da so lahko precej poljubni. Recimo starost, geografska situiranost, okoliščine in pogoji dela, ki jih pač definirajo, skupno kolektivno gibanje, okrog katerega se povezuje in tako naprej. Kar pomeni, da na nek način, ko izberemo enega od teh kriterijev in začnemo govoriti o neki generaciji, mogoče celo več povemo o sami poziciji izrekanja kot pa o tej generaciji. Zdaj, za mlado generacijo je najbolj značilno to, da jih pač definira ta mladost, se pravi neka starost, ampak tudi, ko se odločimo za starost, s tem arbitrarnosti nikakor ni konec. Da dam samo 2 primera. Recimo letos je šla tematska številka revije Dialogi, kjer so si pač to starost postavili pri letnici 1985, kamor običajno umeščamo milenijsko generacijo, ampak to seveda pomeni, da so vključili tudi take avtorje, ki so bili rojeni v drugem sistemu, v drugi državi, skratka izhajajo iz nekega drugega miljeja. In še več, mnogi od teh avtorjev pravzaprav ne morejo več kandidirati niti za Grumovo nagrado za mladega dramatika, ker je pač tam kriterij drugačen in je pač postavljen bolj pomično v smislu, da tisti, ki se pač prijavljajo na ta natečaj, morajo biti takrat stari 30 let ali manj. Skratka, zgodi se lahko, da v isto generacijo umestimo zelo različne avtorje, to pa posledično pomeni, da v tej generaciji lahko pač napravimo tudi zelo različne zaključke.
Nekatere skupne poteze besedil teh mladih dramatičark in dramatikov vseeno oblikuje obdobje poznega kapitalizma kot nek socioekonomski kontekst njihovega ustvarjanja. In če poskušamo narediti nek prerez mlajše generacije, bi lahko zaključili, da detektiramo neke vsem prisotne teme, ki se ukvarjajo s svojo generacijo, z neko kritiko današnje družbe, s temi problemi, s katerimi se mladi srečujejo, znotraj tega prekarno naravnanega sveta, kjer se srečujejo z nekimi pritiski družbe, socialnimi omrežji, mediji in se ukvarjajo s prihodnostjo. Vse te dramske situacije, ne glede na dramsko pisavo, odsevajo neke plasti trenutka poznega kapitalizma, ampak ta ni vedno nujno eksplicitno naslovljen. Njegove posledice so bolj utkane v dogajanja, konflikte dramske osebe, ki neizbežno živijo v tem ekonomskem sistemu. To je tudi logično, če pomislimo, ker je prav značilnost tega poznega kapitalizma, v katerem trenutno ustvarjamo, da s svojimi mehanizmi uzurpira prav vsa področja človekove eksistence. Kar nekako opažamo v besedilih, tudi tistih, ki se recimo niso toliko realistična ali naturalistična, je, kot smo danes že tudi slišali, neka odsotnost utopičnih alternativ, ki bi pred bralstvo in potencialne prihodne uprizoritelje nekega dramskega besedila postavila neke podobe prihodnosti, alternative ali pa jih povabila k iskanju rešitev trenutne krize. Ampak v bistvu namesto tega dramski teksti podabljajo predvsem podobe sedanjosti ali pa neke bližnje distopične prihodnosti, s katerimi pa želijo počrtati, izpostaviti in razkriti trenutno neko nasilje neoliberalizma, neoliberalne države in poznega kapitalizma. Ta trend lahko recimo v dramskih besedilih, to je neke dramatike brez generacije, vsem povežemo s tem kapitalističnim realizmom Marka Fisherja ali pa počasno razveljavitvijo prihodnosti Franka Bernardija Biffa, ki v bistvu s tem opisujeta ta občutek, da je kapitalizem edina možna in izvedljiva politična ekonomska opcija, ki jo trenutno imamo, in da si v bistvu ne moremo zamisliti neke njemu konherentne alternative. Zato tako kot like v dramskih besedilih, kot tudi to dramatiko, vseeno preveva nek občutek končnosti in izmučenosti.
Zdaj, ker govorimo o generaciji oziroma primanjkljaju generacije, se zdi nujno povedati, da to ni samo generacija dramatikov, ampak da so dramatiki vseeno vpeti v gledališče kot neko kolektivno umetnost, kar pomeni, da sodelujejo pač tudi z drugimi ustvarjalci, se pravi, govorimo o generaciji gledaliških ustvarjalcev. In zdaj, če se mi navežemo že samo na nas tri, ki smo tukaj pred vami, čeprav mi vsi trije pripadamo tako imenovani milenijski generaciji, je med našimi letnicami rojstva razpon 5 let, kar čeprav smo rojeni v isti državi in istem sistemu, še vseeno pomeni, da je veliko razlik med nami. Zdaj, kar se zdi najbolj pomembno pač za to našo generacijo, je v bistvu ta nek sociološki pripis milenijski generaciji nekega individualizma in apatije, kar smo v bistvu že slišali. In to v bistvu na nek način drži, zdi pa se, oziroma vsaj mi to raziskujemo, da je velik faktor tukaj tudi odraščanje, ki je sopostavljeno razvoju interneta in socialnih omrežij. In zdaj, socialna mrežja, ki so ustvarjena v bistvu kot neke platforme druženja in povezovanja in v bistvu nekega iskanja, nekega kolektivnega momenta in ustvarjanja skupnosti, pa hkrati v bistvu lahko delajo ravno nasprotno. Se pravi, posamezniku omogočajo na nek način, da mu je vse dosegljivo, da v bistvu s svojim profilom in svojo neko reprezentacijo identitete in prepričanj postane sam sam svoj center sveta in hkrati tudi sam svoj medij, kar posledično vpliva, če gledamo zdaj na čist umetniško ustvarjanje in specifično dramatiko, vpliva na to, da v bistvu avtor oziroma ustvarjalec sam sebe vidi kot svoj medij in posledično sam izreka svojo resnico, kar v nekih čist postopkih v sami pisavi lahko nanesemo na avtobiografskost in samoreferencialnost in to smo v večjih besedilih tudi sami zaznali. Zdaj pa, kaj je tukaj pomembno, je tudi to, da v bistvu ta prisotnost in potreba po reprezentaciji na socialnih omrežjih je hkrati tudi vezana na pač nek lasten konstrukt realnosti. Se pravi, zaradi tega se v bistvu posamezniki in ustvarjalci na nek način alienirajo od neke materialne resničnosti in v bistvu zapadajo v nek konstrukt realnosti, ki ga sami vzpostavljajo na socialnih omrežjih. In zdaj pač ta fenomen, kot sem že rekla, se pač močno zrcali v vseh vrstah umetnosti, zdaj pa čisto konkretno v našem primeru znotraj dramatike, pa to opažamo, kakor sem že rekla, v neki avtobiografskosti, hkrati pa tudi v samem jeziku, ki je večinoma zelo pogovoren, uporablja veliko slengizmov in anglizmov, hkrati pa tudi uporablja in vpeljuje neke postopke, ki so vezani na neka digitalna orodja, se pravi uporaba emojijev, uporaba, ne vem, chatov, mailov in nekih strukturnih elementov, ki izhajajo pač iz internetnih formatov. Zdaj, poleg tega, kaj je značilno za to generacijo oziroma ti posameznike, o katerih zdaj govorimo, po drugi strani pa kaj ni značilno za njih. Se pravi, to, kar je že Benjamin omenil, hkrati pa tudi to, da v bistvu v primerjavi z neko postdramskostjo, ki je predhodnica pač te nove dramatike oziroma sodobne dramatike, o kateri zdaj govorimo, se v bistvu zdaj v tem obdobju nekako čedalje bolj odmikamo od neke fragmentiranosti, od neke dokumentarnosti, ampak se čedalje bolj zatekamo k nekemu realizmu, naturalizmu, kar je tudi prisotno v samih dramskih formah, ki so lahko zelo klasično postavljene in tudi slikajo, kot je bilo že rečeno, zelo realen, sodoben čas. In zdaj jaz osebno in mi, ki smo to raziskovali, to pripisujemo tej neki potrebi po vzpostavljanju neke realnosti, ki bi bila stabilna in na katero bi se lahko oprli. Potreba po tem samoizrekanju in vzpostavljanju neke lastne resnice, vzpostavljanju nekih lastnih stališč, ki morajo biti uslišana, pa tudi pripisujemo temu, kar je v bistvu, kar smo že povedali v uvodu, je tudi pač sama socioekonomska situacija te generacije. V bistvu odraščali smo na nek način skozi neko ideologijo, neke permisivne vzgoje, kjer nam je v bistvu bilo skozi rečeno, postaneš lahko karkoli hočeš, vse lahko narediš, vse je možno, vse je dosegljivo, in v bistvu z neko to utopijo odraščaš, potem pa si hkrati vržen v svet, kjer ugotoviš, da to absolutno ni mogoče. In to se v bistvu potem zrcali tudi v tem nekem nihilizmu in mogoče pesimizmu, o katerem je tudi Benjamin prej govoril.
Varja je recimo omenila nekaj različnih primerov čist samih lastnosti dramske pisave, od nekega realizma, naturalizma pa do neke te uporabe jezika socialnih omrežij, slenga in tega. In v bistvu, kar želimo tudi izpostaviti je, da te avtorje, torej neke mlade avtorje, o katerih danes govorimo, zaznamuje vsem ta raznolikost njihovih pisav in tudi to njihovo neko fragmentiranost pa razpršenost, kjer je manjko nekih skupnih ali pa skupinskih iniciativ, bi nazaj povezali s tem poznokapitalističnim obdobjem in z nekimi lastnostmi, saj je ta prinesel odsotnost neke fiksne in individualne avtoritete, po kateri bi kot generacija lahko oblikovali neke svoje vrednote ali pa svoje značilnosti, ki bi nas povezovale. Hkrati se je pa v kontekstu identificiranja z generacijo spremenila tudi sama narava oblikovanja identitete. Danes namreč ni ta sistem identifikacije z generacijo, ni več, je v bistvu fleksibilen, odprt in je zelo lasten, torej gre za nekaj, kar posameznik ustvari sam skozi nek proces avtokreacije in v tem smislu lahko tudi sam izbira o tem, kateri generaciji bo pripadal ali s katero se bo identificiral. Recimo, ker smo že govorili recimo o socialnih omrežjih, znotraj nekih mehurčkov socialnih omrežij se v resnici lahko tudi posameznik sam odloči, kateremu mehurčku generacije bo pripadal, kar pomeni, da v bistvu izgine neka splošna in enotna ideja generacije.
Zdaj v polju dramskega pisanja se to mogoče najbolj kaže v tem, da so avtorji in avtorice med seboj precej razpršeni, da se le redko povezuje v kakšno od kolektivnih oblik delovanja, kot je bilo denimo značilno za Preglejevo ekipo, in da praviloma ustvarjajo individualno. Eni od redkih takšnih skupnih prostorov so samo različne izobraževalne delavnice dramskega pisanja in sorodni institucionalni in neinstitucionalni programi. Sicer pa te prostore, v katerih bi lahko avtorji med seboj izmenjevali svoje poglede na dramsko pisanje, na gledališko ustvarjanje ali pa na družbo na splošno, so redki oziroma skoraj da ne obstajajo, zaradi česar tudi avtorji ne prihajajo do sorodnih ali pa vsaj skupnih nekih zaključkov, ki bi jih potem poenotili bodisi v slogu, bodisi v vsebini njihovega pisanja. In zato je o mladi generaciji na nek način težko govoriti kot o generaciji, ker generacija implicira skupnost, kolektiv in tako naprej. Večina avtoric in avtorjev pa je nasprotno prepuščena samih sebi in ločena od kakršnihkoli skupnostnih oblik sodelovanja. Zdaj, to se recimo vidi že v neki splošni zadržanosti mlajših kolegov in kolegic režiserk, ki se zelo redko odločajo za uprizarjanje mlade dramatike. Zato se nam zdi toliko bolj pomembno, da govorimo o generaciji gledaliških ustvarjalcev in ne samo o generaciji dramatikov, ker v končni fazi je dramatika zelo povezana tudi z gledališkim modrom. Skratka, na tem mestu bi lahko parafrizirali to neslavno znano izjavo Margaret Thatcher in rekli, mlada generacija ne obstaja, kar bi pomenilo, da je to generacija, kjer je vsak prepuščen sam sebi, kjer je na nek način posameznik kot samostojni otok oziroma atom, kjer je vsak sam ali pa celo drug proti drugemu.
In zdaj, ker na nek način hočemo kontrirati tej neki pesimistični drži naše generacije, ker tudi sami ustvarjamo kolektivno in na nek način vidimo neko gesto v kolektivnem delu, delamo kolektivno in zato verjamemo, da v bistvu in skozi svoj referat in skozi svoje delo in na radio in tako naprej želimo v bistvu vzpostavljati kolektivnost kot neko potencialnost in v bistvu na nek način tudi strategijo za redefiniranje, kaj ta definicija generacije je in kaj vse ta generacija lahko je, in s tem želimo v bistvu vzpostaviti to možnost, ki je v bistvu zaenkrat ni oziroma jo ne opažamo, in sicer možnost neke alternative, neke utopije in nekega upanja. Tako.
Thank you, Varja, Jakob and Masha. Many interesting topics for discussion that will follow after the next presentation. Next presentation will be done by Nika Schwab, again a young theater practitioner, writer. She also won the Grum Award for the young dramatist. She studied in Ljubljana and in Prague. And she will be speaking today about re-questioning the definition of women's writing in contemporary Slovenian drama. Please, Nika.
Zdravo. Hvala za uvod. Jaz se bom v svojem prispevku predstavila svoje pomisleke in ugotovitve o stanju ženske pisave v sodobni slovenski dramatiki. Za začetek bi samo na hitro povedala, da v bistvu ima ženska pisava v Sloveniji zelo podoben problem kot milenijska generacija, da je lahko bi večino prispevka kolegov pred mano v bistvu samo spremenila in namesto milenijska generacija ali mlajša generacija vpisala ženska pisava. Torej, na primerih izbranih vidnejših slovenskih dramatičark sem analizirala, kaj v bistvu v ženski pisavi je ženskega, na kak način je pisava teh avtoric sorodna, če sploh, in kaj bi lahko bile ključne lastnosti za tako imenovano žensko pisavo. Pri tem pa sem seveda izhajala iz lastne fascinacije nad pojmom ženska pisava in kaj bi le on naj pomenil. Obravnavala sem besedila Simone Hammer Razglednice in Vse ok, Drage Potočnjak, Alica Alisa in Za naše mlade dame, Varje Hrvatin, Vse se je začelo z Golažemi zajčkov, Tjaše Misle in Naše skladišče in Simone Semenič, Mi evropski mrliči in 7 kuharic, 4 soldati in 3 Sofije. Ta besedila sem izbrala tudi zaradi tega, ker so dobila neko večjo prepoznavnost z nagradami in uprizoritvami in se mi zdijo zato mogoče najboljši primer za to, kaj bi v bistvu ženska pisava, kaj je v Sloveniji razumljeno kot ženska pisava tudi strani stroke in kolegov. Med prebranjem sem ugotovila, da v bistvu prav veliko podobnosti med besedili in med opusi teh avtoric ni. Sorodnosti so lahko v praksi zreducirane na identiteto avtoric in na to, da je več replik namenjenih ženskam, da so ženski liki bolj izpostavljeni, so močnejši in nasploh bolj prisotni kot v neženski dramatiki. Ampak še vseeno pa se praviloma ne ukvarjajo z vprašanjem ženske ali z pozicijo ženske v današnji družbi. Seveda gre za problem, na katerega se je že v marsikaterem kontekstu nagovorilo, in sicer, da so ženske resne umetnice, ko se ukvarjajo z resnimi, vseobsegajočimi problemi, kot na primer kritika kapitalizma. Naj samo opomnim, da če bi to pravilo veljalo za avtorje od nekdaj, da ali bi potem Kundera bil kanonski avtor. No? V glavnem, med branjem sem ugotovila, da je nagovarjanja ženskega vprašanja izjemno malo, kar seveda ne gre za to, da sploh ne bi bilo vključeno, da se o tem ne bi govorilo, ampak ker vseeno avtorice in avtori nasploh pri pisanju izhajamo iz neke lastne pozicije, dojemanja sveta, opažanja in tako dalje. In glede na to, da ta besedila podpisujejo avtorice, seveda posredno so vključena vprašanja ženske, kako je na primer odraščati kot ženska, kakšni stereotipi se lepijo na nas, na primer, ne vem, v Varinem besedilu, kako vse se začelo z Golažemi zajčkov, se velikokrat naveže na to, na vprašanje krivde in na to, kaj se bi v bistvu, kako bi bila njena krivda dojeta, če ne bi bila deklica, če bi pač to bil, na primer, ne vem, fantek. In enako potem velja tudi za like pri delih Tjaše Mislej, Naše skladišče, ki se vseeno še tudi ukvarja z vprašanjem materinstva, kaj v bistvu torej za prekarko pomeni, da je tudi mati samohranilka, da ni z otroki, vseeno gre tudi potem za nekaj drugega, za kar moraš poskrbeti. Podobna vprašanja si tudi zastavlja Simona Hammer v zadnji drami Vse ok. Ampak v vsakem primeru so pa to besedila, ki se predvsem ukvarjajo z kritiko sistema, s kritiko kapitalizma, s kritiko družbe, prekarstva, socialno-ekonomskega statusa, ne pa specifično z žensko. Nimam nobene resne alternative, na kak način bi se ženske morale ukvarjati same sabo, ali če bi se sploh morale v svoj pisavi, vprašanje, ali bi to potem sploh bilo kjerkoli prepoznano ali omenjeno. Samo sprašujem se, kaj je bistvo tovrstnih oznak, če potem nimajo prav veliko skupnega, sploh pa se ne ukvarjajo s tem, kar po poimenovanju označuje. Potem, če pogledamo primere opusa Drage Potočnjak, ugotovimo, da spet namenja večjo pozornost ženskim likom, večinoma so protagonistke, kljub temu pa gre za problematiko, naprimer, ne vem, ksenofobije, strahu pred drugimi, nasilja, ki niso specifična samo za ženske, ampak so problematična brez spola. In ja, to, potem pa bi še v bistvu pa izpostavila opus Simone Semenič, ki je v bistvu tukaj, mislim, ki je v bistvu ki se najbolj kontinuirano na nek način ukvarja z žensko pisavo, za kar jaz vidim več razlogov. Prvi je, da je Simonin opus najobsežnejši in ima zato tudi več različnih vstopnih točk, kako obravnavati žensko. Naprimer v skoraj vsakem besedilu se tega dotakne. Moj najljubši primer je Milica iz drame Mi evropski mrliči, kjer v bistvu ženska vzpostavi lik od tega, da prihaja iz drugega okolja v drugo govoreče okolje, kjer nima nobenega podpornega okolja, ne govori jezika, nima službe, vse, kar ima, sta pač otroka in partner in se odloči partnerja kljub vsemu zapustiti. Kar se mi zdi pa, da potem iz neke žrtvene pozicije ženske, ki jo večinoma predstavlja Potočnjak, tudi nek emancipatorni potencial ženske, kar se mi zdi zelo velik doprinos. No, pa da ne bom dolgovezla, ker gre v bistvu pri veliki večini dram za sorodne probleme, bi kar v bistvu zaključila z nekim sklepom, torej z oznakami, kot so LGBT literatura, otroška in mladinska literatura, ženska pisava, praviloma označujejo, od koga in za koga ta literatura je. Sprašujem se, zakaj smo tako fiksirani na identifikacijsko vlogo umetnosti in manj na priložnost za širjenje perspektiv. Ker če je ženska pisava nekaj, kar je napisano od žensk in bi naj bilo namenjeno ženski publiki, se sprašujem, zakaj potem ni več vprašanja o poziciji ženske, zakaj se potem toliko fiksiramo na ta kapitalizem, prekarnost in neke druge socialne aspekte. V tem namreč ni nič specifično ženskega in bi to lahko bila preprosto dramatika, brez kakršnekoli druge oznake. In pri ženski pisavi je v bistvu mogoče zaznati identičen paradoks kot pri ženskem vprašanju, torej, da je dovoljeno, omembe vredno in prepoznano le, dokler je univerzalno in aplikabilno na izkušnje vseh nemarginaliziranih skupin. Ponovno pa se sprašujem, glede na povedano, zakaj je oznaka ženska pisava sploh v veljavi, glede na to, da se pisave znotraj ženske pisave bolj ali manj razlikujejo v vseh, ne samo na način, kako obravnavajo žensko, temveč tudi na nivoju formata, pristopa, v bistvu vsega. Hvala.
Hvala, Nika. Now I'm opening a discussion. I would ask all of you to switch to English, as we have some international guests online and in the hall, so they can get the idea of what we are talking about. We already have some questions from the web wide world, whatever, from the universe, we said yesterday. And the first one, I think it's for all of you that presented. Do you think that the drama of the young generation is being performed by young directors that belong to the same generation, or is it staged also by the older generation in order to establish the intergenerational dialogue?
Young directors. Like I have two examples. For example, Žalostinke by Jernej Potočan were staged by Jan Karmel, and they are the same generation. and also in Maribor Nina Kuclar-Stiković skupaj sami by Nate Gazvoda, where they are supposed to be the same generation, but I think we could say he's a young director.
But he was born in the old system, no?
But he is still in the millennial era. Yeah.
You're stretching a bit.
No, it's after 85.
Yes, but exactly what Jakob said at the beginning of this 85 is really problematic when you speak of new drama, of a new generation in drama. But I agree.
Regarding the question, I think the question was older generation, and by older generation, I would think about baby boomers rather than
Matjaž Zupančič.
For example, yes.
Or Vinko Mejdrendorf.
For example, yes.
Yes, in this respect, I do agree. Any other question?
Thank you very much. It was very interesting and very well articulated. I was wondering, how about the audience and the critics? Is your audience, does this dystopian feeling embraces the sense that you're not received, you're not understood by the audience? And is this audience also generational and defined only through this generational?
I would just like to say that there is no continuous inscenation of young playwrights, so I think it's practically impossible to answer that, because what Varja listed as examples, would I dare to say, are the only two examples of young playwrights on institutional stage. So I don't know. I don't think that's a thing.
There is one more example. I think Iza Strehar and Mojca Madon. No? Oh no, she was just the assistant. I'm
Okay. Another question from our virtual audience. Jure Gantar is posing a tricky question for everybody. Impossible to answer. Can you speculate, in terms of historical dialectics, what comes after late capitalism? Does anyone dare to answer that? We have a few suggestions on the internet: eco-capitalism and green feudalism. So we'll see. Almost impossible to answer. Any other comments, questions from the audience? Here you
go. I would be actually wondering if any one of you could answer, also from a historical perspective, because each generation is sort of centered on its own world, its own experiences and so on. But for example, from, let's say, more historical point of view, a similar relegation of the solution of the problems that we all live in has been made by, for example, the last play of Slovenian playwright Cankar, Lepa Vida. Right there, especially the stress has been put on the point that we today cannot solve the problems, but they will be done. This will be done by the new generation that will come. So I would be wondering what would be the difference between, is it too harsh a word to say, desperation of the present young generation, not seeing the the change to come fast enough, and let's say this 100 years old being caught up in a mousetrap, or this feeling of of no exit or of point of no no return, but the impossibility of improvement at all. If you could perhaps ruminate on possible differences, if there are any. I mean,
I'm just gonna answer for myself. I would say that no, because of I'm strongly relying on this ecological catastrophe to happen. So I'm also like, is it really worth the time, you know? And then also in the last century, a lot of changes, drastic changes has been made very quickly. And we are now at the point of where in a lot of sense we are progressive and improved. And I think that my feeling or my fear is that since we have much more knowledge, much more technology, general equipment for improvement, and if it's not done with that, can it be done at all?
Maybe I would also like to add to Nika that also I think that this change that had happened, and or this utopian idealism of like 1960s that happened after the financial rise, was also quite quickly shown that it's also very easily usurpated by capitalism. So it's also like there's change, but there's also like capitalism quickly takes care that there's no change in a sense. So I also feel like that would just be maybe my comment or my add to you.
So I think, like you mentioned, Tsonka saying that's for the next generation. I think that's very hypocritical, and I really, it's one of my pet peeves, because let's not say older generation, let's say, for the sake of the argument, tradition says the youth will change the world, but while at the same time blocking us from making the change. And I think that is the problem, and that is the reason why we are hopeless. And then sometimes I'm very sorry, just wait for upper part to go away. So, and we will have the same problem if we get to the age of, of course, as Nika said, we are quite relying on the end of the world in the next sometime. If we become an older generation, we would have the same problem, because we are raised in this kind of system and institution, and we will keep blocking the change of the next generation. So I don't think we can try for change, but as long as there's people blocking it, it's quite useless, actually, I think.
May I just reply to that? That I see your point, thank you, but I would say that it's a little bit too harsh on Tsonka to say he was hypocritical, because he tried as much as he could to change, things through his texts, right? And politics, if you want, but he somehow ran into the wall, right, at the end. So this feeling of standing in front of it, that was my question, actually. But thanks for the answer,
Yeah. No, I was wondering about some social parallel. I think it's very clear with the human rights. We can see you have it today and you don't have it the next day, like for female, LGBT, whatever. So that's why I think it's very hard to say, even if we try very strong, if the government decides that, or some, I don't know, dominant structures, if they decide that they will change some, I don't know, laws or something like this, it's impossible to have long-term plan, I think so. It's just a comment, yeah.
Okay. Do you have another? Otherwise, I would have a question for Varja. I found it really interesting that what you said about the form of this new drama, your plays, for instance, that you said that you're searching for a more stable form. You're going back to the traditional drama, of course, with all the experience of postmodern texts and so on, but that in a way you're searching for a more architectonic, perhaps, form in order to secure somehow stability of the world. And an interesting thing that occurred to me yesterday, Blaž Lukan was analyzing your work, and he said that he sees in it the return to suprarealism, to automatic writing. Is this a sort of a feature that the older generation sees and you don't really feel like that, or is it somehow connected?
Is this a question about my writing?
Yes, about your...
I wasn't here yesterday
Oh, you
for
didn't know.
the presentation, so I don't know what he was speaking about. But I don't know how to answer it. I cannot answer it personally, or I feel it's like what we spoke about, like some kind of collectiveness that we are searching for example, as a collective or as maybe a society right now. I think as a generation, I believe we are lacking a collective trauma, and now we have it. But growing up, we didn't have a collective trauma, and we didn't have a collective enemy. Like all our generation, the only enemy we have is the system, but it's capitalism, and it's very very abstract. You can't touch it, you know. And I feel that all the time, as a generation, we are searching for stability, either with work or housing or whatever. We are looking for stability. So yes, I think that maybe in some metaphorical way, the stability of a form might be like a gesture of searching for this stability in life.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And now I'm using the opportunity of Simona Semenic being here, just to basically give you the same question, because I see in your text that you're, of course, the majority is no longer dramatic texts, very fragmentary and so, but in certain texts, like I see in the Me Victim trilogy, that you're returning in a way to more stable narrative and characters. Is this also some... What's the idea behind it? If it is an idea, or I'm mistaken.
There is an idea, but it's more...
Yeah, it's working.
It has to do more with form, with trying to write in different... in different forms, with kind of, I don't know, researching playwriting or theater as far as I can see it and understand it, but you never know what's deep inside.
Okay.
So for me, it's more about playing with form, with researching, with testing my own, let's say, limits also. So yeah, just that, nothing profound.
Well, the effects might be profound. This is then maybe a provocative thinking. Just a comment, and if you want, you can reply on that or not. All of you today, you said that this new generation is very much different from the generations that wrote dramas under socialism, if we think of Dusan Jovanovic, I don't know, and the others. But then the main features of this drama are, again, this social system that cannot be conquered, that seems to be prevailing, so and ever present. And the reaction is a dystopian image of life and society. And this is something that we see usually in Jovanovic's play or the plays of his generation. How come?
I think this is the same. The answer is actually what Valia said before: the collective trauma, and the fact that they have, as I said, seen the change. I think here's the difference: the trauma and the change that we, I don't think, have.
And also we were born and raised in a system that was supposed to be the best, and as it turns out, it's not. And since this was the solution that generation of our parents and also generation of Jovanovic was relying for and counting on, and then it happened, and they were like, well, we tried, but we're retiring now, so bye. And you know.
That's true. But it's interesting that they were actually born in the world that was promised to be completely different in 45, 50. And all their work was done exactly because of a trauma that this didn't happen. Okay, so in sort of between Jovanovic and Potrč is this terrible, struggle that Potrč believed that after the Second World War things will be different, and Jovanovic was disillusioned in this. And then, of course, it was a complete disillusionment all the way to the 1980s, and then it got this idea, okay, now things will change, and with Jančar, Jovanovic, they all believed that. Yeah? The change came, and they even got engaged in politics, not all of them, some of them. And the disillusionment, of course, came like, I don't know, 5, 10 years later, and your generation is now the one that is angry, and it is disillusioned, and is sort of, you promised us a better world, and this is not happening. It's not happening for us. It's not happening for anyone. Yeah. But in a way, I think that this disillusionment, this trauma, is also stimulating artistic work. Is stimulating the drama. Is opening questions. We have no answers. We don't know how to react, how to, what to do, particularly now, in this terrible crisis of Corona,